Hello and welcome to Unprofessional Engineering. As always, my name is James.
And you got Luke.
This is wonderful. This is part 2 of our Game of Thrones celebration.
Part 2, I think is how they would say it.
That is very medieval style. Is that right? I don't know. We're going to go with that. Today, Luke, we are going to be looking at castle construction.
You're way more excited about this than I am.
I was looking at this stuff late last night, and I just couldn't put it down. I love castles and dragons and wizards and knights and all things nerdy.
Didn't you do a vacation last year or 2 years ago where you were in Europe and you visited a castle or two? Was that you that did
I
that?
did. I visited a number of castles last year.
Where was that? Scotland you were at?
England, Ireland, Scotland, Wales, France.
Oh, excuse me.
Yeah.
Parlez-vous français? I didn't realize you were like the world traveler.
Well, now you do.
Okay.
So, the castle, Game of Thrones. Think the Red Keep. So in King's Landing, this is where Joffrey and all the other kings live. Why are you laughing at me?
You realize
Cersei.
None of this means anything to me. The Red Keep.
So the Red Keep's this
Joffrey
very
versus
fancy castle where all of the main Lannister family live, okay? And now that's not really the castles we're going to be talking about so much.
Okay.
We're more like the Winterfell castles. So where the Starks reside.
I was thinking Starks.
I thought so. Okay. Anyways, typically a castle would employ about 3,000 people to build the thing.
Whoa.
So you have to muster up quite a workforce, okay? And they range in all sorts of skills from like carpentry to masons to blacksmiths and then the diggers and the quarrymen and things like that.
I would have been a digger probably.
Probably. It sounds a lot like slavery to me, but I'm not certain about that.
Yeah.
Maybe they really enjoyed this.
And what I understand too is these things would take a really long time to build.
Not really, like 2 to 10 years, depending on the size.
That's a pretty big
So I
range.
guess that it could take a really long time. 10 years is a long time.
But what I understand too is a lot of times what they would do is when they finish, they would then they were always expanding,
Right.
making the
They'd add
walls
it on.
taller or wider or
Right.
adding additional walls on the outside of the already existing walls.
Mm-hmm. That's right.
Yeah.
So why do we build castles?
I would think because they look cool.
That's the reason I would build one,
Yeah.
for sure. So there were 3 main reasons people were building castles back in ye old times.
Ye
How'd you like
old.
that? Ye old.
It's getting good here today.
All right. First, danger of invasion by enemies from another country. So this is the reason the majority of the castles in Europe were built.
Okay.
They were afraid of like the Frenchies coming or other countries, Germany or someone, and also the Vikings. So from like 900 to 925, the Vikings would show up and start beating people down.
Yeah, they were
Your
pretty
favorite, the
hardcore.
Vikings.
I know.
Always robbing churches and stuff.
There's a whole series of in the Viking TV show, which I think is better than Game of Thrones.
You've never seen Game of Thrones.
Well, but again,
Violence, nudity, dragons.
okay, well,
Vulgarity.
There's no dragons
What more do
in,
you
in Vikings, but there's a whole series when the first time they actually went the other way and they raided in England. Like they always raided themselves basically, but then they finally went west.
I remember
guess.
this, yes.
And it was pretty interesting the way
was.
they did it.
Okay, so that was one reason. Another would be danger from rivals in your country, so like civil war.
Like your own people.
Yeah. So people were upset with the ruler or the king or the local baron or whoever, or maybe just opposing factions of a royal family. Like, if I kill this guy, I'm going to be king, or
Yeah.
I have a claim to the throne.
Apparently,
whatever.
a lot of brothers and sisters were doing this, just like in your Game of Thrones.
Exactly.
Okay.
Yes, just like in Game of Thrones.
Just like it.
And then there's also the uprisings from all the local bums that, like, we don't like you. We're going to kill the king.
Local
Or,
bums.
in the case of, like, the Normans, when they invaded Britain in 1066,
Okay.
they built a number of Motte and Bailey castles to control the locals. So, they're not happy that they just got conquered. They're angry at their new rulers, so they needed to stay safe.
That sounds like a drink you'd order at a bar. Could I get a Motte and Bailey?
I like that, yeah. That would be... We should make that drink.
I think so.
We'll post the recipe on Facebook.
There you go.
This will be our new gig. This is how we're going to make it big now.
And everybody's going to be drinking Motte and Baileys whenever they're watching Game of Thrones in 3 weeks.
Oh my God, this
or
is
2
gonna be
weeks,
awesome.
or whatever weeks it is.
That's right. All right, so the types of castle.
Okay, shoot.
I'm going to start with what we just talked about, the Motte and Bailey. So it's basically a keep on the top of a hill surrounded with a fence. That's about what I got out of it.
Well, the thing that I found was even before the Motte and Bailey.
There was something before the Motte and Bailey?
Well,
That's called a cave.
No, it wasn't a cave. It was basically earthworks. It wasn't stone or wood. They literally would just mound dirt.
And that's where we're going to build our...
And that's where our keep would be, or that
Right.
place that you stay safe. And your enemies or whoever would actually have to climb the hill, and it's tougher to climb a hill rather than running, I guess, on flat
Right.
ground. So even before actual castles, it was basically like when you were a kid, king of the hill.
King of the
I would
hill.
climb to the top, you'd try to come up, and I'd
Knock
throw
me
stuff
down.
down again.
Yeah.
That's
Yep.
what it was before the Motte and Bailey.
Interesting. All right. So there was the mound of dirt, followed
dirt.
by the Motte and Bailey, which basically was building a fence around that mound of dirt, kind of. And then the next one that I have is the rectangular keep. That's one I have listed. So popular in the 11th and 12th centuries. Interesting thing about this, usually the stone that it was built out of was too heavy, so they didn't always put them on a hill like these other ones
Okay.
that were made out of wood, like the Motte and Bailey usually were. So the entrance would be on the second floor to make it harder for people to get up when they're attacking you. So think of like the Tower of London. So this would be a good example of a rectangular keep.
I gotcha. And the keep, that's like the safest place in the
That's
castle,
like, yeah,
right?
that's like the castle.
Like where the king goes.
Right, I guess
Okay.
so. Maybe that's where he lives and stuff.
Okay. And,
Yeah.
And what I understand about the Motte and Baileys, they were. I think all castles generally they're comprised of three basic elements. The first one, at least the Motte and Bailey, was a big earthen mound. They typically built these on mounds. The second one was they formed like these. It's called. This is where the Bailey comes from, and these were the buildings around that. And then the third part of it, this was the actual keep. So there was actually the hill, like the people's area. This was typically like the center of the city, and then inside the center of that city is where the keep was.
Right.
So like basically all the peasants were not allowed in the keep.
Right, because they're peasants.
That doesn't seem very nice.
Well, sorry. You're allowed in the keeps now if you go on tours.
That doesn't help me whenever the Vikings are attacking.
Well, there aren't any Vikings anymore, so...
Oh, jeez. I don't know. All
So-
those guys with man buns out there, they look like
They do.
Vikings.
Hipsters are basically Vikings, except afraid to
Exactly.
do work.
So. There goes our entire hipster
I know.
audience.
That's probably not
Just
many.
ruined it.
This is too close for work for them. So the next one I have is the shell keep. I think you have some other things listed, but let's talk about the shell keep
Yep.
a little bit. This showed up in the 13th century, and it was often an upgrade of the Motte and Bailey. Mm-hmm. And it, like you said, it held various buildings inside of the circular or semicircular stone shell, and then it was kind of Motte and Bailey-ish.
Yeah, and I think the thing that made the shell keep was the stone around it. Like I don't think the
Right.
Motte and Bailey, from what I understand, that had necessarily big stone walls.
They were typically wood.
Yeah, and I think the shell keep is where stone was starting to be used rather than wood, from what I understand.
Right. I also have the concentric castle in the 13th and 14th century. So this combines the shell and the rectangular keep. I don't know why it took them so long to figure all these things out, but this thing had a big advantage when you were being attacked because the people attacking you had to go through all of these separate lines of defense to finally take you over.
Yeah, I would think that the concentric was just at the beginning. I mentioned, you just keep on building. It's
Right,
like,
that's kind of like an extension. Yeah.
First I build my Motte and Bailey, and then I put the shell keep up, and I do another wall, and then let's add another wall on the outside of that wall. So my guess is that was probably just like a natural progression of. I would bet the closer to the center of the castle, like you'd have like really old architecture.
Probably.
And then as you get larger, if you didn't get destroyed by the Vikings.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So the last one I have listed is like a palace. So what we're used to today, kind of fancy, and they're more of like a showpiece than they are a defense.
Yeah,
That's like what the Red Keep is, just so you know.
Oh, it is? Okay.
think so.
I have no idea what the Red Keep even means. So Gothic, when I was doing a little digging here, so the
Very
Gothic castles, very little research. The Gothic castles this was basically when they weren't as concerned with defense. It was more about the opulence
Okay.
of the castle. So
Showing how wealthy you are.
exactly.
Yeah.
So basically, if you look at all the castles before Gothic castles, these were muddy, dirty, damp, nasty places. It's not the Red Keep.
Right.
But these Gothic castles, it was all about like how much money you had. So there was a lot of windows, tall, vertical, narrow windows, and when
Stained glass. Yeah.
and there was typically rather than a dirt floor, it was the castles you see today when you go on these tours that you were talking about. These are the castles that kind of most people see. And these had, higher ceilings. They had, light coming in. They had way more decorative designs. And this is probably the most popular whenever you think of like the Walt Disney World castle is an example of like a Gothic castle.
Right. That was a good tie right there.
You like that little
because they're
Disney?
actually going to be our sponsor later on.
Oh, they are?
No, that's not
Okay.
accurate. But that's a good point. But I did think it's funny that these are all a sign of their wealth and things like that. And these castles often bankrupted the kings and queens that were building them. So
Yeah, and the people that had
and
to
the
build them,
people,
right?
right.
I mean, could you
That's
imagine
funny.
being a peasant like back then, like the work they asked you to do?
Yeah.
That's ridiculous.
Yeah, it sounds pretty terrible.
And my guess is it was like, you can do this
Or a
and,
serf.
and we won't.
Weren't you serfs back then? Serfdom?
I think I would.
guess you were a
I think
peasant.
you would have been a serf, and I would have probably been like a medieval landlord.
You think so? You would have been like a baron?
Yeah.
Okay, I could
sounds
see
good.
that.
Baron.
Yeah.
Baron Bon Luke.
I like this. Do you have any other castle types that you wanted to talk about?
I got concentric. No, I think that's about it. I wanted to make sure we left some time to talk about like construction techniques. We talk about some of the ins and outs of what makes up a castle.
Okay, that sounds good. So before we do that, I think we're going to take a little bit early break today because why not? And take a word from our sponsor. And like I said, it is not Disney.
Really?
Yeah.
That surprises me.
I know.
I would think they'd be all over this.
Yeah, you would think that.
Okay.
With their Imagineers, like if you're an engineer there, you're an Imagineer.
That would be a cool job.
Yeah. Well, we don't have any shout outs either.
Really?
I'll actually give a shout out to my buddy Scott who suggested this Game of Thrones themed series of podcasts. So
What does Scott do for a living?
he works in his dad's factory.
Okay, so nothing to do with engineering.
Well, he does work with machinery
Okay.
and presses and powdered metal.
Oh, okay, so then he's-
lots
yeah.
to do with engineering, really.
Okay, a ton to do with it. Okay, never mind. That's a good shout out. I like
yes,
that.
it was a good shout out. Also, I'm remembering this time, if you subscribe to Unprofessional Engineering, you will score yourself some sweet Unprofessional Engineering stickers. We have a bumper sticker, we have a square sticker. They're amazing. Some of them have our faces on them. So just subscribe to Unprofessional Engineering and show it to us by emailing us at unprofessionalengineering.com. No, wait, unprofessionalengineering@gmail.com.
There you go.
Or Facebook us or Twitter us or whatever.
On the interwebs, if
The
you Google
interwebs,
us,
yes.
you will find us. And also, if you wanted a special edition, I'm just throwing this out there. And I didn't even ask you.
I don't
about
know where
ahead
this
of
is
time.
going. Go ahead.
Not that anyone ever want our signature,
Ooh.
but maybe we sign a couple of these and do something different with them.
I don't even want to know what they have to do to get the signature version.
I don't know. I don't
Have
know.
a friend sign up.
Yeah, but yeah. Maybe if you prove that you got like a friend to sign up, maybe we do
We'd sign them.
and it'll be worth nothing. But
No, I mean so much because pretty soon I'm going to be famous. So.
like, how can you put a value on our signature?
Anyway, subscribe. Email us at unprofessionalengineering@gmail.com with proof of your subscription. A number of people have already, which I'm shocked about, which is great. And we will send you some stickers.
Sounds good.
We might even sign them if you're lucky.
Maybe.
It's one of those shiny markers.
Ooh.
Okay, so anyways,
Back to it.
let's get back to how do you build a castle? And so there's a lot of
Slowly.
steps. Slowly is good, we're done. So the first thing, I think this is funny, is get permission. So you had to get permission from the king or queen to build your castle.
So there could be sub castles.
Sub-castles?
I would think the king and queen would be the only ones. Okay, or I guess like a
No,
duke or a lord would have a castle.
Right, you can be
Yeah,
sworn in as a landowner by the
Okay.
king or queen and then be allowed to build your castle. Or if you're the king or queen, you can just build it wherever
Do
you
whatever
want.
the heck
Yeah.
you want.
The next step that I found was get a good master mason.
Yeah.
So pretty much the guy that mocks up the plans for your castle. So especially in the times they were building these things, there weren't a lot of people with a good understanding of geometry. So
You
these,
don't-
you
you don't say.
Right. So these people understood geometry, and they were able to use their rudimentary tools like their compass and their set square to draw these things up in a way that, would look okay and would be feasible.
And these are the same people that would like bleed themselves if they were sick. So the fact that they don't understand math and geometry doesn't surprise me because they were.
I don't know where that came from, but you're right.
They were super dense back then. No offense. I mean, but people were.
Or they would like keep wounds open to keep
Yeah.
things out. Yeah, that's very strange.
So the fact that they didn't get geometry and math is not surprising to me at all.
Okay, well, that's fair.
Okay.
All right, next step.
Next step.
So you got permission.
Got permission.
You got
I got my masons.
the blueprints. Yep. Now you find a big workforce. So I told you 3,000 people is
These
pretty
poor-
much what they were going
these
with.
Poor peasants.
Yeah. So if you're the king, you can pretty much just force people to do it. If you're like a baron, you probably have to like hire the locals and pay them, things like that. But these were usually in city centers, but cities weren't that big.
No.
So I feel like mustering up 3,000 people, you're probably going to have to pay them to move wherever your castle is being built, because they seem like out in the middle of nowhere some of the time.
Yeah, and I would think that these would probably be a lot of your employees anyways. Like, these would be the people that work the land for you.
That could be,
and,
yeah.
like,
So now you don't have food growing, you're just building
Yeah.
a castle.
And if you think
for
about
10 years.
if they're making this stuff out of stone, just think
Yeah.
about like transporting that stuff
Yeah.
like from point A to point B, because all the stone isn't going to be like right there.
Probably not.
So there's a whole transportation and
Yeah, that's the last thing
logistical
you want is a big ugly stone quarry right by your castle. Quarry. A big question about stones. All right. Next, you
goodness.
have to secure your site. So the locals probably don't really want you there, which is why you're building
Yeah.
the castle to begin with. So you have to build defenses to keep your workers safe, as well as to keep your castle safe, because you don't want them, knocking it over, apparently.
Gotcha.
So that makes sense. Choose your site, usually on a prominent place in the landscape, or in a commanding location where you could command traffic or communication, like there's a bridge or a river crossing or something like that.
I would think like a peninsula would be a really good one too. Like so you'd have water on like 3 sides or 2 sides. That way it'd be harder for people to attack. Like if you look at like a lot of these castles in Germany, like, and you just Google castles.
Castles in Germany, is that what we should Google?
That would do a Google.
Oh, okay.
They're right on the water, and my guess is if you're in a boat and I'm like shooting you with like a crossbow, that's probably a lot. I could just like basically pour boiling oil on you, or like catch your boat on fire and you're done.
Yeah, you're right. So I have a little segment on attacking castles here coming up, but
I don't want
you're
to
right.
jump the gun there.
Yeah, don't jump the gun, would you?
Sorry about that.
So now that we've chosen our site and gotten permission and we have our workforce and we got our blueprints, it is time to level out the land. Of course, you can't just build. You have to have a nice even spot to build on, right?
Yeah, and they didn't have caterpillars back then either.
It turns out they did not. They were close by, but they did not.
Surprising.
So people had to dig and flatten by hand, and added to it, you might have a moat involved, so that's even more digging around. So they would just move like tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands of cubic yards of dirt and
Yeah.
soil and rock and awful things.
Yeah, and I would think you'd have to build these
I'm not much-
foundations pretty deep too,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
I mean, because you can't just you can't just set it on the ground, right? You would depending on how tall it is.
I guess, yeah.
I don't know.
So the next thing is laying the foundation, which I thought is interesting because they basically use rope and pegs to measure these things out. And that's how they make sure they're keeping things straight and laying things down properly according to the blueprint from
you
the master
you
mason.
still do that today, you know? You got a
Yeah.
little chalk line. It's basically the same thing.
Yeah, so you measure this out and you get like your foundation set down, and then the rest of it's pretty easy,
Yeah.
right? You just have to haul around giant stones all over the
Lift
place,
them.
lift them, place them.
Cement them.
So until the 12th century, most of these things were just timber, so not so bad. But then they would have to make all of their stuff on site to put it together. So
Yeah.
it was all like it was like a little town there just to build it, because
These
you had to
cats-
shelter your animals, you had to have homes for
Yeah.
your people.
I would think these cats had to be pretty handy
Yeah.
with like a hammer and chisel
You'd
and
think.
axe. I mean,
Yeah.
the stuff they were making.
This is a good one. If you want to hear about how they use these tools, check out our Viking Ships podcast episode. And they basically would make an entire seaworthy vessel that could cross the ocean with an axe, which is just mind-blowing to me because it was really cool. Cool tip here, though. Oak hardens with age. So you can chop down oak and transport it and work it and bend it easily when it's new and fresh.
Okay.
And then it hardens for better defense as it gets older.
I did not know that.
Yeah. So there you go. Make your castle out of oak.
I would think cedar would be a good one too because it's rot
And
resistant.
it smells good.
And it smells good.
Yeah.
I don't care.
It
I'm
is
not
rot
sure
resistant.
they all had BO, so I can't imagine that
That's
that the cedar smell would really affect anything. But the rot resistant would probably be a good one.
that is probably a good
Because
idea.
if you think about it, they knew nothing about like waterproofing or anything like that.
Did you build your raised garden bed this year?
No, I didn't. I'm a loser.
Sorry to hear that.
Yeah.
Mine's doing pretty well right now.
I'm just hoping I get some tomatoes or some salsa.
I have
friendship.
a lot of bugs eating my plants, but you know,
Maybe I don't want any tomatoes.
the tomato plants are the only things that look great.
Okay,
right now.
good.
All right. So, anyways, now how do you attack a castle?
So I have some interesting things on attacking. So
Oh, go for it. I'm tired of talking.
yeah, getting back to the concentric castle, the reason why the development of these castles happened. So you started out with the Motte and Bailey, and then you went to the Shao Keep, and then like the concentric. The reason being was they kept on getting smarter. As dumb as these people were back then, they kept getting smarter, and they got to the point where they would just dig below your foundation, let the wall crumble, or tunnel under and just come up like via
That's
a
smart.
tunnel.
Oh, yeah,
so
good
that's
idea.
where like the concentric castle started. And the interesting thing, that's where the moat came from. I had no idea that's
You can't
what a
dig
moat
under
was
a
for.
moat. Is that what you're saying?
I was under the impression that the moat was purely just to make it more difficult for them to get to it.
Right.
It was for the underground tunneling, because the minute unless you went like way
yeah,
down
that's
under
a big,
the water,
Yeah.
but they'd hit the water and it would flood the tunnel and kill whoever you had down there digging a hole.
It's a great idea.
So the moat was to prevent the tunneling. So that's why it's always, relatively deep and
I thought
all
the moat
way
was just to
around.
keep the Black Knight at bay, but that's okay.
Is that a Monty Python? Is that Monty Python?
I think it's Monty Python, and I think it's also Family Guy.
Okay.
So, again, where I get all my education from. That's cool. That's cool about the moat, though.
I did not know that. The other thing too is they started making the walls a lot thicker to make it more difficult to break through, because again they started getting more and more sophisticated with their attacks. And also, the walls started to get higher and higher as
course.
they got better at building these. Obviously, the first one you build is going to stink. Like, think about when you were a kid, right? You're making a fort. The first one's the worst. But,
Yeah.
after a couple years of making forts, I could make a pretty sweet
Well,
fort.
kids are pretty bad at stuff, too, so there's that. Yeah.
Well, they're kids.
Right. They're bad at stuff.
They're children, James. Let's be a little forgiving here.
I guess so. What do you think, like, the drawbridge showed up? Like, they were like, all right, we got this sweet moat, and we have this bridge going across that's kind of screwing us over. Do you think that's when they were like, let's make a bridge that we can pick up?
Yeah,
Seems like a great idea.
Yeah, and if you think about, that's where I think the engineering really starts to come in, because
Oh, it's not enough that these people are learning how to cut these stones in the right shape,
Exactly.
carry them, move them, place them properly, measure things out with sticks and ropes and pegs. That's not enough engineering for you. Now the drawbridge is where it comes
but
in.
the drawbridge, you're so number one,
Wow.
you're either pulling this up with chains if they're they have a blacksmith and they're making chains, or they're using ropes.
Probably
but if
ropes.
you think about where you pull a drawbridge up from, I mean, that's some significant force
Yeah,
that
that's
you have
true.
to pull. And my guess is, as these poor guys are cranking this wheel to pull that up, I guarantee you lots of people died. Whenever someone let go. Or,
Oh, yeah.
Hey, put the pin in so it doesn't spin back, and it did. Next thing you know, you get crushed. So to me, that is probably one of the coolest pieces of castle architecture and design is the drawbridge. Just
Okay.
what was involved in that.
Yeah.
To me, seems pretty cool.
Very cool.
Because you'd want to do pretty quickly, too.
Yeah.
Because if the bad guys are coming, it
Right.
can't be
You don't want to slowly do it.
Yeah.
Right. So I guess that's how you protect it, but how do you attack it? The first option I saw was surround the castle and then starve because you don't have a plan. So I thought that was a pretty...
So
that was the
people
plan.
attacking starve, or
Yeah,
you don't let food
they
in?
come and attack, and then like they starve or they starve you out, depending
Okay.
on how big your castle
So
is.
it's
and what's
like
going on in there.
attrition, basically.
Right.
I
So that's
gotcha.
one way. Scale the walls with a scaling ladder.
Okay.
Which, while you're doing this, keep in mind, like you said, they could dump
Pew,
oil
pew,
on
pew.
you. They can pew 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 you
Hit
with
you with some arrows.
Oh, I thought that was your Star Wars
No,
laser gun.
I make the same pew 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 for any kind of shooting weapon. Since we're
Okay.
talking about medieval, that's a crossbow.
So they're shooting you and dumping oil on you and all that while this is happening. You can ram the doors down. So if you get across the moat, or if it doesn't have a moat, you could try and ram the doors down.
Okay.
Or if you happen to have a giant around, like One Weg Wondar One, he's 1-1. He's awesome when he shows up on the screen in Game of Thrones.
Okay.
I guess when he did, sad.
He's dead.
He's dead.
Isn't everybody on Game of Thrones dead?
Pretty much everyone's dead.
Okay.
Yeah. He could just open up the gate for you and smash it
How
down.
big was this guy?
Really big.
What, like as big as me?
Not as big as you, but probably probably 6 or 10 normal people's.
Whoa.
Yeah, tall. And then
Height.
bulky.
Okay.
He's a giant.
Okay.
Okay, anyways, you can tear down the walls. So you can smash them down with a catapult or a trebuchet, and then kind of throw hooks around them and start pulling the blocks off. So that's another
Gotcha.
one. Again, they're firing at you. And that's about it. Those are your options.
Yeah, I would think that probably the most if you were attacking a castle, you had to have a ton of people because just the
huge army.
Because they built these in specific locations. They're on top of hills. There was no easy way to attack. So if you were the attacker, if you were the attacker, you had to have just 10 times more people than you actually needed because you knew you were going to lose.
Because you're overcoming this castle.
Yeah,
right.
you knew you were going to lose 70% of your people just in the initial attack.
Right.
So I would think you had to be pretty strategic with your numbers.
Yeah. So I have one more thing I really want to talk about. Do you have anything else you want to add in before I get into that?
So I do want to talk about the main gate. So I didn't know this. Sometimes they would leave the drawbridge down.
Okay.
On purpose.
All right, I don't like this.
And what they would do, so whenever you're looking at the concentric castle, so there was a main exterior wall with a main gate and the drawbridge, right?
Right.
So a lot of times they would do is they would lure you in. You're like, oh, the bridge is down, let's go by. And
Suckers, then they'd close it behind you.
And what they would do is once you got in the main gate, they would close it. And typically there was a courtyard. And then the real gate was, so if you imagine
That's
two
smart.
concentric circles, as soon as they came in the main gate, they'd close the gate, they'd capture, a couple hundred of your guys, they'd close the other gate, and then they would just basically shoot you like fish in a barrel, pew,
Right.
pew,
Pew, pew.
with your arrows or pour boiling oil on
That's
you.
awesome.
Yeah.
That probably was a good year. People were like, oh, they charge and they rush in. And after a while, word gets around, watch out for these drawbridges.
That only happens a couple of times.
Yeah. Fool me once. Yeah. Okay.
Fool me once,
I'm dead.
hundreds of my people die. Fool me twice,
Yeah, shame on me.
they still die.
All right, so the last thing I want to
Shoot.
talk about is really awesome. It's a modern day castle. And so not
now?
not like Disney, but there's an actual project called Project Guledon, Gueledon.
I'm sure you pronounced that incorrectly,
I'm
but go ahead.
Where a castle is being built in a forest in Burgundy. Apparently Burgundy is part of France. Who knew?
Okay.
They're using all techniques from the olden days.
I think I saw
Ye
a documentary
old
or
days.
something about this
It's
for a little
awesome.
bit.
So it started in 1997. It's expected to take 25 years. So I think they're projecting 2023 as
These guys
the
are
finish
the
date.
worst at how fast they work.
Well, they're using everything that would be done in the 13th century. There's 70 people, and only 40 or 50 are really workers. The other 20 are engineers that don't use their hands.
They got nothing else to do.
Yeah. So that's pretty awesome. But the castle consists of a dry moat, curtain walls, corner towers, a large tower keep. They're doing everything on site. So they have stables. They have their own quarry. And,
You said that correctly.
thanks.
Good job.
And shapestone. They have a pulley system to move all of these rocks. They have a treadmill driving a crane kind of thing. And everything else they're moving with horses, so all the
That's pretty
animals
cool.
are on site. And you can go there and watch the construction and things like that. They have school trips going there. All of the mortar is made on site with lime, soil, and water. And just think about all the stuff, like the accuracy that they need with the old tools and rebuilding the scaffolding every time the walls are getting higher. Like,
Yeah.
it's really nuts.
But but here's the thing. So these are all pretty smart people because it's
Right.
it's now.
Right.
Do they have to like not do things
I assume.
that like they want to do to like make it easier?
Yeah.
They have to do it the way they
Like,
would have
just
done
bring,
it back then.
Yeah, just bring the caterpillar in for one
Well, I'm
day.
not saying like the caterpillar. I'm saying like just like whenever you think about like they probably didn't understand pulleys and levers and fulcrums
did,
as
yeah.
well as we do now.
Oh, right. Well, I don't know. I mean, they're using all the materials from back then,
Yeah.
so you're still at that disadvantage. But I
Yeah.
mean, there can't be any way to, dumb yourself down. You know what you know.
Yeah. Okay.
But
That's
this is
interesting.
basically like a LARPer's dream.
What's
Have
a
you ever been
LARPer?
LARPing?
Oh my goodness! If you tell me that LARPing is like a Game of Thrones thing, I'm gonna strangle you.
It's live action role playing.
I'm still gonna strangle
They
you.
do this, so they do this in Pittsburgh. I've seen it, where people like dress up like with swords and like
Oh,
in
the medieval
costumes.
festival
It's
that
like
they
the
do.
medieval festival,
Okay.
but like people just like go in the forest and they like have big battles. And if you get smacked by a sword, like I don't know. I've never done the LARPing.
I bet
but
you want to LARP.
I kind of deep down want to LARP, but I'm too ashamed to do it.
Oh my goodness!
I mean, I'm pretty confident in most things I
So-
do, but LARPing is too much.
Our friendship is on a razor's edge right now, James. I'm just saying, between Game of Thrones and LARPing.
If you gave Game of Thrones a chance, you would probably like it and
Okay.
get into LARPing.
So, last thing I want to mention.
Uh-huh.
You got your last thing. I'm gonna get my last thing. I know we're like a minute over.
Sure.
You can actually, if you just Google castles for sale,
Yes.
it is ridiculous. Number one, how much they cost. They're in like the millions and millions of dollars. But there are people that own castles that are.
Sting owns a castle, or at least he
That
used
doesn't
to.
surprise me.
Yeah.
He's Sting.
Yeah.
But you can actually just buy a castle. If you got a couple $1 million,
Yeah.
you can own a castle. And
I didn't look this up, but I've seen it before where the price of the castle isn't really the big cost. You have to keep them in their natural state. So for you to run electricity or things like that, it's just millions and millions of dollars because you
Yeah.
have to have it like in the stone walls and replace everything and fix it up. So the real cost is making it actually something you want to live in.
well, and like, could you imagine like
Heating.
it
heating
takes
that
takes
place.
me like 40 minutes to cut my grass.
Yeah.
Right. Could you imagine if you got a castle? I mean, unless you're
I
Sting.
guess you're that rich. It doesn't matter.
Yeah, unless you're Sting, it would just be millions of dollars just for the not
upkeep.
the maintenance, but just the daily upkeep.
Yeah.
grounds and
Your
toilets,
servants, your
toilets,
serfs. Yeah.
toilets. I mean, where do I poop in a castle?
Right. Yeah, that's a great
Right?
question. That is a great question to
On
end
that
this
note.
on.
On that note.
All right. Well, that's episode 2 in our Game of Thrones celebration.
Oh.
One more to go next week.
I can't wait.
All right. Talk to you then.
See ya.